Technology, innovation, business.
This is CNN.
Happening now, breaking news. President Biden and U.S. allies draw a new line against Russia, vowing NATO would respond if Vladimir Putin uses chemical weapons in Ukraine. After emergency talks here in Brussels, the president is touting Western unity and promising that increased pain on Putin will stop him in the end. Also breaking right now, a new setback for Russia's attacks from the sea. Ukraine says it destroyed a Kremlin warship in a key southern port. This, as the battleground around Kyiv, the capital, rages on. We're getting new reports of intense fighting just north of the capital. CNN correspondents are on the front lines in Ukraine at key locations here in Brussels as Russia's unprovoked and brutal war enters a second month. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Brussels, and you're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're coming to you live from the European Union headquarters here in Brussels after a very, very intense and busy day of emergency summits. President Biden standing together with U.S. allies against Vladimir Putin and his aggression in Ukraine. Let's go right to our senior White House correspondent, Phil Mattingly. Phil, 4 weeks into this brutal, awful war, the President of the United States wanted to send a message to Putin and to the world.
Yeah, no question about it, Wolf. A senior U.S. official describing the mood behind closed doors where leaders gathered as sober, resolute, a group keenly aware of the historical nature of this moment, but more than anything else, a group that's unified.
NATO has never been more united than it is today. Putin is getting exactly the opposite what he intended to have as a consequence of going into Ukraine.
Tonight, President Biden marshaling the full weight of the world's democracies to isolate Vladimir Putin.
The single most important thing is for us to stay unified and the world continue to focus on what a brute this guy is, and all the innocent people's lives are being lost and ruined.
1 month to the day since the start of Russia's unprovoked and increasingly escalating invasion of Ukraine, Biden pressing the urgency of the moment and directly warning Putin against potential chemical attacks.
We would respond. We would respond if he uses it. The nature of the response would depend on the nature of the use.
And backing an effort to remove Russia from the Group of 20.
If Indonesia and others do not agree, then we should, in my view, ask to have basically Ukraine being able to attend the G20 meeting and observe.
On a day, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky twice used virtual appearances to plead for more action from Western leaders.
You can give us 1% of all your planes, 1% of all your tanks, 1%.
As the Ukrainian military continues to surpass all expectations in a fight that is now in a stalemate.
Please, never again tell us that our army does not meet NATO standards. We have shown what standards we can reach, and we have shown how much we can give to the common security of Europe and the world.
But that battlefield success also driving palpable concern about what Russian President Putin will do next, driving Biden to launch a high-stakes and increasingly urgent diplomatic sprint with back-to-back emergency summits designed to keep an unprecedented alliance of democratic nations united and secure commitments for new action.
We are determined to continue to impose costs on Russia to bring about the end of this brutal war.
The U.S. slapping sanctions on 328 Russian lawmakers, as well as 2 oligarchs with close Putin ties, while also continuing the assault on the Russian central bank, making clear its gold reserves are subject to sanctions, all as Biden announced the U.S. will welcome 100,000 Ukrainian refugees through a full range of legal pathways and disperse another $1 billion in humanitarian aid.
This is an international responsibility. The United States, as a leader, one of the leaders in the international community, has an obligation to be engaged.
But with no endgame in sight, Biden making clear the true goal of the day and months ahead.
The reason I asked for the meeting, we have to stay fully, totally, thoroughly united. Thank you.
And that U.S. officials believe this is a crisis that will continue for months, if not longer, will be brought into sharp focus on Friday. Tomorrow, the president will meet with the leader of the EU to announce a longer-term energy agreement to try and move the EU away from reliance on Russian energy. He'll also travel to Poland, Wolf, where he is expected to meet with refugees, underscoring what the president said today, that the U.S. is a, quote, major piece of the puzzle when it comes to caring for and providing humanitarian aid for those hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of refugees that have departed the country. Wolf?
Yeah, lots going on indeed. Phil Mattingly reporting for us. Thank you very much. And now to the breaking news from the war zone. Ukraine saying it has destroyed a large Russian warship at a key southern port. CNN's senior international correspondent Ivan Watson is in the region for us. Ivan, first of all, what are you learning about this extraordinary attack on this Russian warship?
Well, the Ukrainian government has claimed that it has destroyed this Russian Navy landing vessel called the Orsk, which was docked at the port, the Russian-occupied port of Berdyansk. And we know that there are pretty dramatic social media videos that have emerged from that port showing just a massive inferno engulfing the bow of a ship, and then two Russian warships as fast as possible, pushing off from the dock and trying to pull away. And both of them also have smoke coming from those vessels as well. And the Ukrainian government is claiming that they not only destroyed the Orsk, but also damaged two other Russian ships and hit a fuel depot there. We don't know what kind of weapon they used for this attack, but we do know about the presence of the Orsk because Russian state media had TV reporters on the bow of that ship and on the dock side, basically boasting about how it had come into this Ukrainian port and how it was offloading Russian armored personnel carriers and its capacity to carry up to 20 tanks and 40 APCs and hundreds of troops. And there are some Ukrainian officials who are even kind of somewhat joking, suggesting that it is Russian state TV that effectively helped paint the bullseye on the ship for this Ukrainian attack. Now, further up the coast from this port is the much larger Ukrainian city of Mariupol, which has been the scene of this horrendous modern-day siege, where the Ukrainian defenders there are vastly outnumbered by the Russian military forces. That said, they are remaining defiant. They say they're going to fight street by street, house by house. Take a listen. I interviewed one of the Ukrainian defenders of the city. Take a listen.
It's urban combat. So yeah, that's the street to street, building to building. The enemy trying to block us in the city blocks. We're pushing them back. The enemy have a very, very serious casualties. We're not counting them anymore. We need the heavy anti-air systems first. We need aircraft second. We need artillery pieces, and we need anti-tank guided missiles.
But Wolf, while this devastated city is a battleground, we just don't know how many Ukrainian civilians are trapped in the middle of this vicious urban conflict. And we know that there are a growing number of Ukrainian civilians that are becoming casualties of this terrible battle. Wolf.
Good point. Important point indeed. Ivan Watson, thank you very, very much. I want to bring in right now CNN's senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen. He's reporting from Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital. Also with us, our military analyst, retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, and CNN's chief political analyst Gloria Borger. Fred, Ukrainians can't afford to wait on NATO leaders. They're keeping up the fight. What's the latest that you're seeing on the ground in Kyiv?
Hi there, Wolf. Well, it's actually quite interesting. As we're speaking right now, we actually have air raid sirens that are currently going off here in the Ukrainian capital in Kyiv. And of course, that's something that unfortunately is an all too common occurrence here on the ground in Kyiv. In fact, you can hear it right now. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's an air raid imminent, but it certainly means that the Ukrainian defenders of the city are seeing something in the air that they believe could be dangerous. And it was really that kind of day once again here in Kyiv, Wolf, as we had a lot of kinetic activity. We had a firefight that was actually seemed fairly close to where we are right now. However, the Ukrainians are saying that they are making some headway, that they're able to push the Russians back, certainly in the northwest or towards the northwest of Kyiv, where you have a suburb that's called Irpin. And in that suburb, they say they control about 80% of that right now. However, the Ukrainians are saying that there's still shelling coming from the Russians towards their position, so obviously still contested area. And then one of the new things is that the Ukrainians are now saying that to the east, they've also made some headway, apparently taken back a small town there and encircled some Russian forces. So by and large, if you look at the front here, and it's a very complex front around Kyiv, because you have several sort of places where there is fighting going on, the Ukrainians feel pretty confident right now that they can hold the Russians at bay and even push the Russians back. It's certainly what they're trying to do here, and what they say they have at least limited success doing, Wolf.
Well, you know, I keep hearing those sirens, those air raid sirens, Fred, going off now 3 or 4 times in a row, maybe more. So what happens? Do folks immediately go down to these shelters? These, you know, when there's a siren like that going off, there's bunkers obviously all over the place, and there's some more.
You know, here in the city center, most people will probably stay in their houses. We've had very little in the way of airstrikes in the city centers. But if you go especially towards the sort of more area of the outskirts, especially in the north of Kyiv, people there are already in bunkers, Wolf. We've spoken to a lot of people. We've witnessed a lot of people there who are in subway stations, others who are in the sort of basements of their houses, especially if it's sort of larger residential buildings. They all spend the night there because there has been so much activity, so much shelling going on in those areas. And certainly when they hear the sirens, obviously it's even more unnerving for them. But, you know, for us here, it's definitely obviously the cue that you have to be inside when these sirens go off. But especially for the folks who are more towards the area where some of that combat is taking place, they already are in shelters. And if they're not, they're definitely there right now. But in any case, right now, the capital is under a curfew from 8 p.m. every evening. So we're well into that already. People are all inside, but certainly now being warned that there could be obviously aircraft in the way or on the way here towards the Ukrainian city, or possibly already above it. Wolf.
Well, just be careful over there. Stay safe. Fred Pleitgen, appreciate it very, very much. We've got courageous journalists on the scene. You know, General Hertling, President Biden says NATO has never been more united. How forceful a message does does today's summit here in Brussels actually send to Putin?
Well, it's a very big message, Wolf, because we're talking about what were Mr. Putin's strategic and operational objectives. He is currently stalemated on the battlefields in the east and the south of Ukraine. And as Fred just pointed out, the battle in the north around Kyiv was Mr. Putin's primary objective. Take the capital city, replace the government. He has not been able to do that in 4 weeks when he planned for it in 3 days. A term we're going to need to get used to, Wolf, is the Bucha-Irpin-Kyiv pocket. The Ukrainian forces have the Russians surrounded. In fact, the 35th Combined Arms Army surrounded in that area, and they are without supplies in the north. The Russians can't go anywhere. They are going to continue to be attrited by the Ukrainian force as long as the Ukrainians continue to get supplies. In the south, that sinking of the ship was critically important because that was a resupply ship. This will come down to the Ukrainians attriting the Russians and the Russians attempting to get resupply, which they have not been able to do. So when you talk about the president saying NATO is more united than they've ever been before, that was another strategic objective of Mr. Putin, was to further divide NATO. So he has not taken the capital of Kyiv. He has not done the things he wanted to do in the south and east of the country. He has not divided NATO, and the United States is not divided either. So all of those things contribute to Mr. Putin probably being very upset.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, Gloria, how far does President Biden's leadership today go as the world watches this war drag into its second month?
Well, I think it goes a long way, as we've been just saying. This is a president who was trying to strengthen an already hamstrung NATO alliance. And I think they've surprised themselves in many ways by how united they have become. But we're just a month into this. This could drag out. And there are lots of decisions that need to be made. And there were questions that were asked today that there are no answers to, at least not that we know of. For example, what if the Russians were to decide to use some form of chemical weapon? What would the alliance do then? That's a very difficult question. The United States, for example, doesn't depend as much on Russian energy as some of the members of the NATO alliance do. Can the alliance keep it together and try and figure out a way to wean the EU off of Russian energy? So there are lots of decisions that need to be made, and every country comes at it from a different place. But at this point, NATO has been unanimous.
Very impressive indeed, what NATO has done today and what they have been doing. Guys, thank you very, very much. Just ahead, will increasing the pain on Vladimir Putin stop him, as President Biden promises? I'll get reaction from a U.S. war veteran and a key member of Congress. We're live here in Brussels, and you're in the Situation Room.
In a special ongoing season of the Tug of War podcast, CNN reporters are on the ground in Ukraine, documenting Russia's invasion, the escalating conflict, and what it means for the rest of the world. Tug of War. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Jenny Wassenaar, Chief Sustainability Officer at 3VM Packaging. Sustainability is an imperative for any business. If you look at the footprint of your organization, you have to make sure that by 2050 latest, you're at zero emissions. This is important for the Earth, it's important for future generations, but it's also important for your employees. So I'm expecting that businesses that do not focus on sustainability, that they will not be around for a very long time. Of course, this looks a bit like a threat, but it's actually not. It's a great opportunity for companies to embrace sustainability, take sustainability in your DNA, and make a future career and success for your business out of sustainability.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for a market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
Our engine continues, our impetus, our momentum.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. Give me the facts on voter fraud.
There has never been a moment where voter fraud has affected the outcome of an election.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
Normally this theatre would be filled with people and art and debate and energy, and so now we have to rely on the two of us.
How interesting is it to be Tyler Mitchell today? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening. There seems to be some confusion that maybe you can clear up. Where are the US forces in Syria going? And fully understand what's at stake.
What's happening now in the world is a great thing because people are talking about subjects they never did before.
Amanpour, weeknights on CNN.
We live in such a fast-paced world where the news has been so relentless. Historic events have happened one after the other. I think that you need that daily appointment with viewers around the world to try and sort through the news of the day. What's important? Why does it matter to me? How do I put it all in context? We follow the news as it happens and where it happens. And then we also take a step back to walk the viewer through the day's news. That is the mission of Hala Garani tonight.
I am Nigerian by blood, British by birth, and American by residence. It is important to me that those same strands of inclusivity that flow through me are mirrored in the stories that we tell. One World is a place where Africa has an equal seat at the global table alongside Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Every continent has a voice, and where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, weeknights on CNN.
We're live here in Brussels, where President Biden and U.S. allies spent hours and hours all day today in urgent talks on the war in Ukraine. Let's get some insight into what they did and did not necessarily accomplish. We're joined by Congressman Jason Crow. He's a key Democrat who serves on the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees. He's also a veteran of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Congressman, thanks for joining us. This was certainly, and I'm here in Brussels, a real show of force from the West. But how much does this really change the situation for Ukrainians who desperately need help, and they need it immediately?
Well, certainly it was a significant meeting and announcements that came out of the last 24 hours. President Biden announcing the United States will accept 100,000 refugees is a significant announcement, and shows the United States is willing to step up and lead here. But just the visuals of the NATO alliance coming together, the leaders of the various countries, the defense ministers, our Secretary of Defense, visiting and showing solidarity, working together, is something that just a couple of years ago, there were questions about whether or not we could ever really do that. So it is significant. It shows the world that Western democracies are strong, that we're willing to work together. But now we actually need to translate that into additional action. What we've done so far has been significant. The Biden administration has stepped up in a very, very big way with Ukraine. But the needs are growing. Ukrainians can win this, but they can't win it just with what we've provided so far. We have to do more. We have to move faster.
President Biden says what will stop Putin is maintaining the sanctions and increasing the pain on Putin. Do you agree, or do you fear Putin will only grow more dangerous the more isolated he becomes?
Well, I do agree with that, but I think there's an additional component to it that I believe the administration and the president also agrees with from my discussions, is we have to make sure that the Ukrainians can win this war. So we don't just do one thing. We're not putting all of our eggs in one basket, hoping that economic pressure, diplomatic pressure is somehow going to change Putin's mind or result in the oligarchs or civil resistance within Russia to overturn Putin's rule. We have to also count on the fact that Putin might continue to press this regardless of what happens in Russia, and we have to equip the Ukrainians with what they need to win. I actually think the Ukrainians can win. There weren't many people a month ago who thought that. I actually may have been one of them that thought that the Russians had overwhelming combat power and would have won this by now. That hasn't happened. The Russians have performed poorly. The Ukrainians have performed superbly. The international community has rallied around the Ukrainians. They could actually win this militarily if we give them the right weapons and if we do it quickly.
You got to give the Ukrainians a lot of credit. Congressman Jason Crow, thanks so much for joining us. We obviously want to continue this conversation down the road. Coming up, the Pentagon's top spokesman on U.S. military strategy against Russia following the big NATO emergency summit and the prospect of Putin's using chemical weapons. Our live coverage from here in Brussels continues right after the break.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Before the Second World War, much of the German watchmaking industry was centered in Saxony. One of the most important brands there was A. Lange & Söhne, known for the supreme excellence of its watches. After the war, Saxony became part of communist East Germany. Lange as a company disappeared when the communists bundled together all of the watch companies in the town. But Walter Lange, the great-grandson of the founders, escaped to the West. In 1990, after the Iron Curtain collapsed, Walter Lange returned to the town and revived the company. A huge task, but he succeeded. But what always hits me about this watch is the dial. The dial of a watch is not a big space, so when you try to arrange the elements on it asymmetrically, you are playing with design fire. But Lange succeeds brilliantly.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief. So let me just put it to you straight, Senator. Senate Democrats, they're getting their butts kicked.
No nonsense.
Are you simply shooting the messenger because you don't like the message?
Facts first.
How stupid do you think we are? Allies in Washington are covering for him, and they shouldn't get away with it.
Because getting to the truth matters.
The Washington Post went and confirmed the date of that hearing. So you're telling me unless I go back in the time capsule, you're not going to believe it?
Aaron Burnett out front. Weeknights on CNN.
I'm Sam Abdulaziz in Lviv, Ukraine, and this is CNN.
We're back with our live coverage from Brussels on President Biden's emergency talks with key U.S. allies about the war in Ukraine. He's now making it clear that NATO would respond, quote, in kind if Vladimir Putin uses chemical weapons in Russia. Before President Biden's remarks, I spoke with the top Pentagon spokesman, John Kirby, here in Brussels. We're here at NATO headquarters. Inside, 30 NATO allies, the leaders, are meeting right now. They've got a lot on their plate right now. This is a critically important moment. Give us the big picture. What do you see unfold?
Big moment. Obviously a critical time here to get the leaders together like this. There's going to be a lot on the agenda, not least of which is going to be what's the force posture? What does the alliance look like going forward? I mean, no matter how this war ends, and obviously we want to see it end today, the security environment here in Europe has changed and will likely be different going forward. Again, whatever that looks looks like. And so one of the things that alliance leaders are talking about today is, well, what should it look like? I mean, here in the United States, I mean, we had before the war 80,000 troops in Europe. We now have 100,000. Now, those are on temporary deployments. I'm not saying that that's going to be the future footprint, but we are in the Pentagon looking at what the future footprint ought to look like to make sure that we can bolster particularly NATO's eastern flank.
Because I look at these numbers as a former Pentagon correspondent myself very closely. Along the Ukraine border, the Eastern European NATO allies, the numbers of troops, NATO allies troops, have gone from 20,000 to 40,000 within a matter of a few weeks.
That's right, and you make a really good point, Wolf. It's not just the United States contributing to the eastern flank's security. It's so many of the other allies. They're hosting battle groups. We were just in Bulgaria last week. They're hosting a battle group there. They're leading battle groups like the French and Romania. They're all chipping in. I mean, it truly is an alliance effort. Now, how long these battle groups are in existence and exactly what they're going to be doing over the long term, we don't know yet. That's part of the discussion going on today. But it is important that the alliance stay unified. And frankly, Wolf, having been a naval officer for 30 years, I've never seen the alliance more resolved and more determined than it is right now.
It's so impressive when you speak to the NATO allies right now. They are unified. They all hate what the Russians are doing in Ukraine right now. You know, under normal circumstances, when a Secretary of Defense or a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff calls his Russian counterparts, they immediately take the call, they talk, they discuss, they may disagree, but at least they're communicating. That has stopped, hasn't it?
We have not had a successful attempt to talk to Defense Minister Shoigu, Secretary Austin's counterpart, or General Gerasimov, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley's counterpart. Now, we've tried on several occasions in the last week or 10 days, and we just haven't been able to reach either one of them. I do want to stress, though, that we still have communications with the Russians. We have a defense attaché in Moscow at the embassy who can speak to his counterparts.
Lower level,
and we also have a deconfliction line that we're only using it right now to make sure that it works. We haven't actually used it to deliver content with respect to airspace confliction problems, but there are still mill-to-mill, military-to-military communications with Russia.
Well, tell our viewers what a deconfliction line means, because it is so important.
Well, it's not unlike, in a way, what we're doing in Syria. You've got the United States in Syria still going after ISIS, and you have the Russians and the Russian military still in Syria. And so because we would have the potential for U.S. aircraft to be in the same airspace as Russian aircraft, we wanted a deconfliction line, a phone line. So you can pick up the phone and say, hey, we're doing this in such and such an area, you need to stay clear. Well, we've set up a similar kind of line here in Europe. It's housed at the European Command headquarters in Germany, in Stuttgart. They check it once or twice a day. It's done at, as you said, a lower level, tactical level, just to make sure that when we pick it up, the Russians are actually answering. So far, they are. We haven't used it to deconflict any airspace issues because the Russians haven't flown their aircraft close to NATO airspace. There haven't been any close calls with NATO aircraft. But it's nice to know we've got that line, and so far, it's still working.
Yeah, our chief White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins, is reporting right now, and I think this is also pretty significant if you see what's going on, that there's at least some discussion at a very, very serious level. What does the U.S. military, what did the Biden administration do if the Russians were, God forbid, to use chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons? There's a whole group out there that discusses this all the time, right?
I think, look, you know, you covered the Pentagon. We're a planning organization. Our job is to think about contingencies, to think about the hypotheticals. Now, it wouldn't be very smart for me to get into speculating right now. We haven't seen any indications that the Russians are preparing to use weapons of mass destruction inside Ukraine. But you've heard President Biden talk about this, Wolf. If that were to happen, there would be a significant response, not just from the United States, but from the international community. And I think it's better if we don't speculate about what that response would be. We haven't seen the indications now. And again, we continue to call on Mr. Putin to do the right thing right now, which is end the war. He can end it right now.
And just ahead, CNN talks to the mayor of Kyiv and his brother. Their defiant message to Russia in an exclusive interview. That's next. This is the Situation Room. We're live from Brussels.
This is the result of one single blast.
3.3 million Ukrainians have now fled this country.
You don't have to go far to find a family who has been displaced.
We just heard an air raid siren ring out.
We run down to cover. It is hard to imagine life returning here.
in Kiev,
Dnipro,
Poland.
This is CNN.
If you're craving red meat but don't want to actually eat it, those imitation burgers might hit the spot. You can find them in grocery stores, restaurants, and even drive-thrus. But are they healthy? Well, meatless burgers do contain protein, vitamins, and minerals, and many times they are similar to the protein profile of the meats they imitate. They also contain vitamin B12 and zinc, but beware, these imitation burgers are highly processed and usually contain high levels of sodium and saturated fat. So check your labels and eat them in moderation. They're not health food, even if they are tasty and environmentally friendly. Veggie burgers that are made of beans, vegetables, brown rice, or quinoa are the healthiest option of all. Choose one with seeds and whole grains, and that burger is a meal you can feel good about.
Have you been bitten by the bug of curiosity? This is CNN 10. My name is Carl Azuz. I'll be your explainer-in-chief.
Global news.
International relations are the key factors.
Relevant stories.
Everyday people whose action is changing their community.
Complex issues explained.
We're going back to the future.
And 10-second trivia.
You get a perfect 10 out of 10.
All in 10 minutes. Stream at CNN.com/CNN10.
We're live here in Brussels, where there were urgent NATO talks on Russia's war against Ukraine today. And only moments ago, you heard it live here on CNN. Air raid sirens sounded in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. CNN's Fred Pleitgen now has an exclusive interview with two brothers in the embattled city, both former boxing champions. One is the current mayor. He insists this is not a fight he's ready to lose.
As Vladimir Putin continues his assault on Ukraine, the U.S. believes taking the capital, Kyiv, remains Russia's main goal. But the city's mayor, former world boxing champ Vitaly Klitschko, vows Putin's troops will not enter this town. We met the mayor and his brother Vladimir Klitschko, himself a former boxing champion, in a secret location in Kyiv.
Do you think that you have what it takes to fend them off completely and that this city will not be taken by Russia?
It's our hometown. We fight. We never go to the knee. We don't want to be slaves. We don't want back to USSR to live in dictator, to live in authoritarianism. We see our country as modern European democratic country.
The Klitschkos are on the move 24/7, visiting residential areas shelled by the Russian army, sometimes getting emotional when seeing the aftermath of Russian attacks.
Putin says he's only targeting military targets.
Bullshit. Sorry. Where is military target?
Comforting those affected by the war and overseeing the effort to train those looking to confront Russian forces. You've really stepped up and really have organized the defense of the city. How did you manage to do that, learn that so quickly, learning on the fly?
We don't need to organize. I meet people in blogpost with very peaceful profession, artist, musician, doctors, never ever have idea to take the uniform and take the weapons in the hand. But right now, they in the street and ready to fight. A few days ago, the apartment building destroyed from rocket. One man, around 60 years old, coming to me and asked what I have to doing. What I have to do right now. I give him proposal to evacuate him to my safety zone, to west of Ukraine. He told, Mr. Klitschko, my mayor, I don't want to leave from my hometown. Please, give me weapons. I am ready to defend my family, my lovely Kyiv. Instead the panic, instead demoralization, the people motivate so much and have spirit to defend our future.
But they're up against a strong and better equipped foe. As President Biden visits Europe to meet NATO allies, the Klitschko's message is get tougher on Putin. What are your demands? What do you guys need to continue this fight?
Our will is strong, and it's better and stronger than any army and any weapon. But we definitely need to close our sky. Our civilians and our cities are getting destroyed, and it's continuing while we're giving this interview and speaking about it. The fights are still going on. We need supply of the defensive weapons. And you guys just need to stop any economical relationship with Russia. This way, we will isolate them, make him weaker, and just show that international law cannot be broken. Oil. Obviously, the world needs oil and gas, but it's better to pay higher price than to pay with lives for that oil.
And so you guys obviously, or you want a no-fly zone, I gather, and aircraft, anti-aircraft systems and the like to beat the Russians in the skies. That's one of the most important things, right?
If you supply us with defensive weapons, we're going to close the skies on our own. We have enough men and women that are going to stand for the country and will defend it as strong, as much as possible. And we're going to close the sky on our own. We just need the defensive equipment for that.
Vitaly Klitschko knows Joe Biden well. The two met both in Washington, D.C. and in Kyiv when Biden was vice president and the U.S. frontman for Ukraine policy in the Obama administration. What's your message to Joe Biden as he comes to Europe?
Stay with Ukraine. Thank you very much for support. Support Ukraine. With our friends, we are much stronger. It's our future. It's our freedom. We're ready to fight for that, but we need support for the whole democratic world.
The Klitschkos are international celebrities with massive fan bases in both the U.S. and in Europe. And yet they say for them there is no other place they want to be than in Kyiv, despite the dangers. You're some of the prime targets for the Russians, you know. They're out to get you. Why do you do it? Or what motivates you?
It's our homeland. It's our parents here. We grown up. It's our country. It's our home. And the simple answer, we have to be here.
Do you know this expression of roots? Our roots are here. Our father, that was one of the Chernobyl survivors, and he was one of the liquidators that buried in Kyiv, and he's Ukrainian as it could be. our relatives, our friends. Every single street reminds us on some memories in life. And that's something that gives you so much strength, because the truth is on our side. This is pretty much reminds me, like in a fairy tale, the fight between the good and the evil.
What a story. Fred Pleitgen reporting for us. Fred, thank you very, very much. And this is important. For information about how you can help humanitarian efforts in Ukraine, go to cnn.com/impact and help impact your world. Coming up, another breaking story we're following. We're just learning about text exchange between the wife of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows involving the 2020 election. Stay with us for that. The Situation Room continues. We're live from Brussels.
For World Sport.
World Sport.
For World Sport, I'm Amanda Davis.
I'm Patrick Snell.
I'm Alex Thomas.
I'm Coy Wire.
I'm Don Riddell.
I'm Andy Shaw.
And this
is CNN.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks. And sometimes go down a path that's not marked.
Where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them.
These protests are a test for Hamas.
And any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again. The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks and security forces firing tear gas.
When you dare to take risks, you witness passion and persistence.
And they just want to get their past be processed so they can get out of this facility.
And that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
The world is changing, the industry's changing, the windows are changing, things going to streaming are changing. And I think if you're a company that just sits around and says, I'm going to do things the same way I've done them for the past 20 years, you're going to be left in the dust. So IMAX has been looking to move into other areas. We did a live stream with Kanye and Drake, and that was really successful. People dancing in the theaters. We also, in a related way, did a deal with Disney Plus, where we're now on that service.
This be a front row seat.
And for a number of the big Marvel titles, you could see them with IMAX aspect ratio. So the core movie business is doing extremely well. I think we have to lead the way to a transition to the new world and look at new ways of doing things.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
It makes a lot of sense to switch to sustainable energy. In terms of transportation, it makes EV is very attractive from that perspective. The core of electric vehicles is the high voltage batteries. We take pride in doing a lot of things in-house.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Other breaking news coming into the Situation Room right now involving the January 6th investigation. Our congressional correspondent, Ryan Nobles, has the story for us. So, Ryan, what are you learning?
Well, Wolf, we have learned today that the January 6th Select Committee has in its possession a series of text messages between Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, and former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. There are 29 text messages in total that took place from early November through the end of January, shortly after the 2020 election. And in these text messages, which CNN has now been able to review, you see an exchange between Thomas and Meadows, where Thomas implores the Chief of Staff to encourage the former president and his administration to vigorously fight the attempts to certify the 2020 election. I'll give you an example of just one of those texts. For instance, on November 10th, Thomas wrote to Meadows, quote, "Help this great president stand firm, Mark. You are the leader with him who is standing for America's constitutional governance at the precipice. The majority knows Biden and the left is attempting the greatest heist of our history." Thomas also suggested to Meadows that he encouraged Sidney Powell, the conservative lawyer, to continue on with her efforts to find voter fraud and use questionable legal theories to try and upend the election. And then, of course, there was January 6th itself, Wolf. Ginny Thomas has admitted that she was at that speech at the Ellipse, but left before any activity happened here at the Capitol. But she did text Mark Meadows shortly after that day. On January 10th, just 4 days after the January 6th insurrection, she wrote, "We are living through what feels like the end of America. Most of us are disgusted with the VP and are in a listening mode to see what to fight with our teams. Those who attack the Capitol are not representative of our great team of patriots. For DJT, amazing times, the end of liberty." Now, Wolf, Ginny Thomas has not been asked to appear before the committee. The committee did not comment on the content of these text messages, but it is clear that this is now a part of their investigation. Wolf.
Our Ryan Nobles reporting for us. Ryan, thank you very, very much. And we'll have more news right after this.
I'm Selena Wang in Tokyo, and this is CNN.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 70,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore CNN.com/impact. Click to take action.
Free the Girls is an anti-trafficking organization that was started to help survivors re-enter the workplace through the sale of secondhand bras in used clothing markets around the world. My name is Dave Terpstra, and I'm co-founder of Free the Girls. One of the things that we discovered that survivors struggle with is getting back into society after they've been rescued, after they've been rehabilitated. How do they re-engage real life? And so we created a program that's designed to help them start their own micro-enterprise and grow their own business for themselves. We have women donate bras, and as we say, bras are something women wear close to their hearts. And this is an issue that touches the hearts of many women, and they want to play a part. They hear about these women who are traumatized, who have been trafficked around the world in terrible situations, and this is such a tangible way for them to reach out. When CNN first came 10 years ago to tell our story, we hadn't yet shipped our first container of bras. And CNN was there to record the entire process when that container arrived. That first container had 30,000 bras. We've since shipped 9 40-foot containers. Over 1 million bras have come here to Mozambique for our women to sell. That has transformed some lives.